If you look at our customer base here at Blue Corona, the customers who don't stick around a long time or don't see success oftentimes are customers that we don't have a relationship with. And what that really boils down to is we don't understand their business, whether that be their needs. There's a lack of communication. Communication is a two-way street. Communication means a message is received by two parties. It's not just spoken and not heard. And so when it comes to collaborating with your marketing agency, it absolutely is a partnership. Welcome back, everybody, for another exciting episode of BlueTube, powered by Blue Corona. Today, I'm joined by Rory Rowe, Director of Marketing for Heartland Home Services. Rory, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Rory, I'm super excited to have you on. I've known you for, about 2 or 3 years now? Kind of virtually, though. We've never met in person.
Yeah, correct. It's been a while.
So, Rory, you have quite an interesting background. How did you get your start in the trades?
I think it's in my DNA, to be honest with you. I'm from Jamaica, firstly, and my parents, my parents, they operate a hardware store, much the same like a Home Depot here or a Lowe's. And so it's always been a part of my DNA where, the plumbing pieces, electrical pieces, HVAC systems, that kind of thing is concerned. And it was one of those things where I, had moved to New York and I was working in a law firm there. And this is after having completed law school. And I was just not enjoying it. It was just not a fit for me. And I started applying for jobs in marketing. And a friend of mine actually moved out here for a job with Goodyear. It's after that I came visiting and I was like, you know what, let me just look around to see what's here. I was tired of the concrete jungle that New York is. And I decided to say, hey, let me find some greener pastures, if you may. And applied for a job at Blind & Sons. And I mean, I don't know what else to say apart from they say the rest is history. I've been here ever since then. And it was a natural fit, like I said, because I did have that experience, that background with dealing with those, parts, pieces, if you may, from the hardware. So it was a natural, transition for me into the trades, pretty much.
Going from, you mentioned concrete jungle, so I assume you were in New York City. What borough were you in?
I was in Brooklyn.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm originally actually from upstate New York, the Capital District. And I don't know how many years you were in New York, but if you talk to someone from the city and you tell them you're from upstate New York, they're like, oh, Westchester, White Plains.
Exactly.
And I had to say, no, I'm basically from Canada is how I describe it to them. But Saratoga Springs, Albany area. So yeah, Ohio is quite the move to greener pastures, as you said.
I am familiar with Albany from the perspective that when I was applying for my bar exams, they're headquartered there. So I had to be writing back and forth between, I was in New York City, Brooklyn to Albany to try and figure out how, sitting my bar exams would have worked out. But like I said, eventually didn't do it because it was just not a fit. I just never wanted to practice law anymore. I wanted to go back to marketing, and marketing was something that I was doing prior to going to law school. My bachelor's is in public relations and marketing. I worked in financial marketing for 2 years before going back to law school. So again, a natural fit for me to have gone back to something I knew I enjoyed. I never wanted to spend my career doing something that I just did not like any at all, is what it boiled down to.
Tell us a little bit more about Blind & Sons. Give our listeners kind of the full rundown of who Blind & Sons is as a company, services you offer, where you're located, all that jazz.
Blind & Sons. Blind & Sons is my home away from home. The people here are second to none, amazing. And that too, again, made my transition here, that much more, worth it. I found a family here with the company. Blind & Sons, essentially, we're a company that offers HVAC services. We also do plumbing, electrical, indoor air quality services to our constituents. We are located in Barberton, Ohio. We service Northeast Ohio is what we like to describe our service area as. And, full service HVAC company. We are one of the largest in our area at this point in time. Since I've been here, we've seen the company grow exponentially.
How large are you guys today?
In terms of revenue, we're just approaching about 30 million, in revenue for the year. Yeah, so that's about where we're at. And since I've been here, we've added that additional about 9-10 million over the past 5 years, because when I started, I think we're maybe about 18-19, somewhere there. So we've grown exponentially over the past 5 years, obviously. And I mean, there are some things apart from the fact that marketing has a lot to do with it, but we just have a great team overall is what it is. And we have been, leaders in our industry for some 87 years now. So second to none in our class is what it is that we like to tell people. And we've been around the blocks. We have experienced, we've tried a number of different things and know what works from what doesn't. And a part of our, experience with our customers overall is to make sure they have the best customer experience possible is what it boils down to. So that's Blind and Sons in a nutshell.
So what has your journey been like at Blind & Sons? Obviously, you're a marketer by trade and by heart, but I believe you also oversee and manage some of the customer service department, correct? Or you tell me, what are you?
That hat has changed so many times. The primary one that I've worn is director of marketing, right? But obviously, as we know, sales is a part of that. The customer service is a part of that. So I liaise a lot with sales, and the customer service unit actually reported into me just up till earlier this year. I think back in January was when we changed that. And that was as a result of the additional responsibilities that my portfolio grew into. So I've done, since I've been here, they've added recruiting as part of my portfolio. And the rationale behind that one was very interesting. It was because, I know how to reach people apparently. And then they added the customer service unit. So I still to date have the customer service unit partially reporting into me just because of the nuances that maintain between, the marketing and that unit. But yeah, it's been one of those things where I'm happy to do any and everything that will aid in the development of the company. So if they come tomorrow and I have the bandwidth to be able to execute on some requests that they have, I will definitely put myself up to do it. It's been a remarkable experience. A lot of growth, a lot of learning. Like I mentioned earlier, my position changed back in January, expanded to now include the entire Heartland, we call it the Ohio Delaware region is what we're branding it at this point in time. And that includes 9 companies from the Heartland brand. So I now have all 9 companies on the management for marketing from my desk. And that brings with it a whole lot of work, a whole lot of different experiences, because most of these companies that Heartland acquired were essentially family-owned companies, and they come with their own personalities. So navigating that, has been pretty interesting, and getting to know the people and, the cultural differences between what maintains at Blind versus what it is that maintains at a Cabela versus what maintains at a PK Wadsworth. So it's been very dynamic and very interesting. I've not had a day that I've said, wow, this is a boring day. It's never a boring day in my job.
And when was Blind acquired by Heartland Home Services? What year was that?
Blind was probably one of the first acquisitions by Heartland, actually. So I think we were acquired back in, if my memory serves me correctly, it was shortly after I started in 2019. So it was either the end of 2019 or early 2020 that we were acquired, if I can pinpoint that specifically. And we were probably number 3 or 4 or 4 or 5 on the Heartland platform. And now Heartland is up to 40 plus companies. I think 47, my last count, is where we're at.
That's amazing growth. And I think if my memory serves me correctly, you said when you first came on board at Blind, you guys were doing about somewhere between 18, 19 million, and you're
correct,
forecasting to hit 30 million this year, which kind of brings me to my next question, which is, I've been talking with a lot of companies like yours, Rory, and people like you, and it seems like 2024 is somewhat off to a rocky start for some companies, whether it's recession, inflation, it's harder to borrow money, right? As a homeowner, interest rates have gone up. So whatever the cause, there's a lot of them out there. It's been a rough start here in this first quarter. How was Blind & Sons or Heartland's first quarter overall? How are you guys doing compared to last year as well?
Interesting question, and it's something that I've thought about, certainly. And based on numbers, it's safe to say that, growth wasn't in our first quarter. It was more looking very flat for us. And the reason we were able to even maintain that, year over year was our people. I think what we did and what it is that's important to note here is the fact that we kind of pivoted in terms of pushing that sale of new equipment kind of a deal, and, telling people that all the reasons why they need to be changing, which are very legitimate ones, was to essentially push the service. So we want to make sure that we're giving people the best in class service that there is to be had. And by that, they then decide if it is that they want to do more with the company. A part of our success too has been the fact that we do have more than just HVAC at Blend. We have electrical and we also have plumbing. And those are not as seasonal as the HVAC department or HVAC vertical would be. So we've had to rely heavily on those, push more of our resources behind those. We've staffed up more in those areas to ensure that there's a balancing effect that's taking place, right? So that's basically how we've pivoted. And looking at the industry too, in terms of what has maintained, if you look at, like, for instance, the shipment cliff, you can see that there is usually a 10-year high, 10-year low almost. And coming out of COVID, that was, data that we were assessing and saying, wow, we were quite able to get to a lot of different households that were ordinarily should have been gotten to at this point in time. So we burned through those because guess what? People were home. They had a lot more disposable income. They weren't traveling as much back and forth. The home services industry and boomed back during those two COVID years, and we benefited from that. So having that realization in mind, we knew that we were up to something coming into, these years post-COVID. We kind of made sure we tried to pivot some. So focusing, like I said, on electrical department, generators, for instance, are a huge deal at this point in time. People are looking for their backup power supplies, especially in light of the weird, natural disasters we've been having, especially here in Northeast Ohio. Certainly. So we've been, looking at that and pushing those and ensuring that we're able to stay afloat from those other verticals. So companies, for instance, too, I have at least two companies in my area that are primarily HVAC, and we've provided them with the tools to say, okay, this is what we are focusing on in terms of service, ensuring your customers are knowing that we are providing the best in class service that there is, right? And that distinguishes us. That's the only thing that can distinguish any company at this point in time.
You mentioned, if you look at manufacturer data and the number of units being shipped, those numbers are down year over year. And so as marketers, when numbers are down or flat, I'm guessing, and probably bet, Rory, you had to really fight just to get back to being even year over year, right? And so that presents a unique challenge to us. And I'm dealing with somewhat of the same thing, when things are slow or slower, for contractors. Well, contractors don't necessarily have that additional money to go hire a new digital marketing agency or something, or, they tighten up their budgets. And so it's been slow for us over here in the first start of Q1. So I'm curious, what was moving the needle? Were there any tried and true strategies that maybe Blend or some of the other companies in the Heartland portfolio have been investing in that still perform well? And those are going to be, kind of your bread and butter strategies.
Growing your maintenance base at whatever cost you can, pushing that. So again, the service, right? Have one service plan member recommend another person to your service plan. Give rewards for that. Incentivize that kind of a thing. Grow that service base to make sure that you have those customers in your pocket that you can actually call on at any point in time. So that's it. We're giving back to our people is what it boils down to. So we incentivize our technicians as opposed to, spending more and throwing more at those different marketing channels that we know obviously are not going to be pulling in the sizable customer base that we want or the replacements that we want. We incentivize our technicians to say, hey guys, convert a customer, have that customer become a part of our maintenance base. And this is what it is that it turns out to. If you look at a maintenance customer and the revenue that one customer brings, in the lifetime revenue of that one customer, it is exponential. So that's what we've focused on, is pressing and making sure that we convert as many of our clients as is possible, or customers as possible, to maintenance customers.
And how are the guys doing through that additional training or additional push? Have you seen increases in the text conversion rates or members signed up for your program?
We have definitely seen increases in that. We've done a number of different competitions internally. We've done, like I said, in competitions to the extent where we've offered promotions to the customers. We've done like a 2-for-1, 2 years, you get sign up for 1 year, get second year free kind of a deal. And that has, like I said, it has grown the maintenance base by maybe about, if I can remember correctly, last time I looked at the numbers was probably last week, and we were up year over year, 10% in our maintenance base growth. And we want to keep that going because, again, not only, strategies that we've had to change, but we've had to notice too that weather patterns have also changed. It's not as cold as it used to be for the winters. It's not as warm as the summers used to be. As a result of that, we have to make sure that, the resources that we have are being funneled in the right direction, notwithstanding the fact that we know that we still have to spend on advertising, because that's what keeps your company top of mind when the customers need you. They need to call who they are seeing. So we've done all of that. So we've maintained a great marketing mix from the top of the funnel all the way down to the bottom. And that has assisted us greatly in making sure that we are accomplishing our goals. And we're on track for year over year. I think Q2, going into Q2, we're looking forward to some growth. We don't intend to stay flat the entire year is what it is. We know with great partners like you guys, re-strategizing. From my perspective, I do a lot of reading too. And I do realize that, I mean, what, for instance, Google was looking at previously in terms of how it is that we optimized our web pages, what it is that the content looks like that we're putting out there, especially the advent of AI. It's not what it's looking at now, right? And we have to essentially pivot again and decide how it is that we're going to be approaching that from a digital perspective, which is where, you guys as the great partners, innovators in this field come in to support Blind and Sons and the other companies on the Heartland platform.
I think that's so important what you said about re-strategizing. And I love that you continue your education, so to speak, as a marketer, because things change every day and it's impossible to become an expert in everything. But strategizing, if you look at our customer base here at Blue Corona, the customers who don't stick around a long time or don't see success oftentimes are customers that we don't have a relationship with. And what that really boils down to is we don't understand their business, whether that be their needs. We understand the industry, right? We focus on home services, but there's a lack of communication. Communication is a two-way street. And in my journalism courses freshman year way long ago, that communication means a message is received by two parties. It's not just spoken and not heard. And so when it comes to collaborating with your marketing agency, it absolutely is a partnership. And I think that's one thing that I've observed from afar, Rory, that you've been able to do, and I'm assuming you do with all your other partners as well, is establish a great working relationship where not only do you know who you're calling at Blue Corona, but Blue Corona knows as much about Blind and Sons as we can and market that business as it fits our own.
And I mean, that's life. I look at marketing as living. It's breathing, it's life. People change, things change, opportunities change. They come and they go. Strategies change. You have to evolve. It's the one thing that's constant. It's across the entire spectrum of your life. And relationships as a result of that constant change are what I think distinguishes everything. Right? So if it is that you don't have that relationship with your media partners, if you don't have it with your digital agencies, of course, you're going to be treating your business as another business that's out there. Sadly, right? But that relationship is pivotal to ensuring that you reach the success that you set, the goals that you set, because you're setting those goals and leveraging that expectation between each other. So I continuously speak to my account representative every day. Sometimes I am in their inboxes or giving them a call. It's what the relationship was built on from the get-go, right? Because you guys, I think, was with Blind and Sons for a couple of years prior to me actually joining the company. And when I joined the company, and I mean, I was introduced to you guys, it was one of those things where I, having been out of marketing for a while, especially not marketing in this industry, needed to get a fast track catch up kind of a deal to say, okay, what's going on? What do I need to know now? What do I need to learn now? And Blue Corona was one, and I credit that, I'll say it wherever I go, that you guys, David and the team at that point in time, were amazing in making sure that I was able to, catch up at a very fast pace to know exactly what's going on in this industry. And you guys are, like I said, are at the forefront of it. There's no better place to get the knowledge from a digital services agent that continues to evolve. I've seen so much evolution with Blue Corona since I've been, doing business with you guys. The continuous pace at which things change, the technology that we use change. You guys have been able to keep up. You've brought innovative solutions all the time. So going back to even the question of what are we doing in terms of this new era almost that we are, doing business in at this point in time, the new paradigm, considering that, like I said, shipment cliff, you can look at that data and see that stuff is down. What are we doing? There's so much innovation that you guys have brought to the table. You guys have looked and you have said, okay, in terms of looking at what your competitors are doing, the landscape has changed. You now have a lot of private equity investment across the region. How do we stay competitive as a larger company who once had more disposable revenue available to be able to do marketing versus those who didn't. And that's probably what would have kept other companies like ourselves separate and apart from or distinguished from the other smaller brands. Now that playing field is like leveled almost, right? So what can we do? Content becomes king again, is what it boils down to. So if it is that you don't have somebody producing the content necessary to distinguish you at this point in time, then you're going to be left in the trails, the dirt behind you, as they say. So that, I mean, that's what it is. The continued innovation, continued learning, continued making sure that what is at the forefront of what it is that your business needs. There are times when I reach out to my account managers at Blue Corona, and they're like, okay, Rory, what is it again? And I'm like, plumbing isn't doing too well right now. What can we do? Right? Apart from throwing money behind the PPC campaigns, they're looking at it and saying, okay, we need to probably change some content that's out there based on data that we're looking at. This is what people are searching for. So we need to adjust our keywords. We need to adjust how it is that we are writing stuff. And that's what you guys come to the table with. It's that continued research, continued innovation that you come with from your end.
It sounds like you've been doing a lot of re-strategizing with not only our team, but all of your partners, and really appreciate everything you just said about our proactiveness. That's music to my ears. What are some of the things that you guys are pivoting to, whether digitally or not? I think one of the things that you had mentioned was you were looking at like some new service lines. Are you guys going to be rolling out any new departments or what?
It's in the works. It's something that we've discussed, and it's not something that we want to rush into because we're good at what we do. We're excellent and amazing at what we do. So you don't want to be taking something else on and then spreading yourself thin. So we're obviously going into it strategically, but yes, there are other service areas that we are looking at. We are primarily residential at this point in time, from Blind & Sons' perspective at least. And we are looking into going into some commercial stuff, apartments. We're also looking into what solar energy possibilities are. So those kinds of things. And you guys, again, have helped us in terms of the research from that perspective, the demand in our area, seeing what that's like. Basically, how we target the people that we have in our service area. That's a big thing. So the one broad stroke brush that typically used to work for everybody when you go to do your traditional media buys, that kind of a thing, that does not necessarily fly or work at this point in time anymore. People demand that you're giving them that one-on-one service, right? It's not everything that's suiting everybody that this individual may need. So they demand that you look at them and say, hey, Brandon, I'm talking to you. Kind of a deal. And in terms of that strategy, we're looking at, doing other things such as geofencing strategies. We're doing, all kinds of different options that we've looked at to say, okay, how do we reach Brandon? OTT is one of those big things that we are looking at to say we can identify that person in that home with that need. And that is where we're going to be targeting to basically get that person in our database so that we can actually provide them with the quality services that we do.
I know you're a numbers guy, Rory, and you've talked about you've mentioned different data points throughout our conversation. How do you use data, or what data do you look at to say, hey, something's working or not, or hey, it's not working. Maybe you already know it's not working, not helping drive your business and do what it's supposed to do, whether that be calls, impressions, depending on the channel. How do you use data to evaluate if it's working or not, and then to evaluate what to pivot to next?
How do we look at what's working and what's not? My philosophy is not one where I try to say, okay, let's throw pasta at the wall and hope that it sticks, right? Like you said, I like to see what the numbers are. At this point in time, in our industry or business, revenue attribution is a huge, huge thing. We want to make sure that we're aligned, appropriately to make sure that we're seeing that at this point in time. So apart from the tracking numbers that we may have on calls, on campaigns that we do, apart from the fact that digitally we are tracking all of that as well, we do want to see, okay, the impressions, we do want to see, the clicks, we want to see all of that. But at the end of the day, it's the revenue that matters, right? So it's that tracking piece between the revenue, the campaigns, clicking, impressions, that kind of a thing that translates into revenue. That's the piece that we're looking at to say how much things have been working. Because I'm supposed to be able to look in my CRM, and I am supposed to be able to see that from the campaign that we just ran for, TV, you guys can tell me that, there was obviously a brand lift that took place because we had that influx of people running to the website. Sure, they went to the website, right? We got that impression share there. But from the website, what has happened? Have they converted from the website? Have they given us a call, one? And having given us a call, did we go quote something? And after that, did they close? right? So if we see that, then that is the way I am viewing it at this point in time. Granted, I can't do that for every single campaign and every single strategy that we have in place, but that's where I'm heading to mentally and heading to with regard to every assessment across the board of any marketing strategy or vehicle that we use.
It's so important to understand what's driving revenue, and even before revenue, what's driving calls, qualified calls. Like that's why we track, record, listen to, and tag all of our clients' calls, is because we know that not all calls are created equal, right? Someone could be calling in to change their appointment that they had already booked earlier in the week. Someone could cancel, or CSRs. Maybe it's the Wild West and the CSRs are changing lead information. So finding that revenue, whether it's coming out of Service Titan or enter CRM here, is super important. But what is the challenge on some campaigns where maybe revenue isn't the ultimate measure of efficacy? Something that is more of a brand play. How do you approach looking at the data or approach defining success for those sorts of strategies?
I mean, like any other campaign, you're going to set what your objectives are, first of all. So if it is that my objective is to have a certain amount of impressions, certain amount of clicks, then that's what I'm going to be looking at. I'm setting smart objectives to start out my campaigns to say, what is it that I'm going after, right? So specific, measurable, right? Attainable, time bound, all those things that we learned back in school that makes a campaign or any project that you're doing successful. Those are the things that I'm looking at. So it will vary is what I'm saying across the different strategies that we roll out, so it's whatever those objectives are at the end of the day. So if it is that, we rolled something out for a branded campaign, we did something on social media, for instance, on Facebook, and we said that we're launching a strategy because we need a certain amount of, need some brand lift in a certain area. We targeted a certain area, and we see that by the people clicking through on the ad, or we see that by calls coming in, depending on what, tracking that we're assigning to it, then that would have decided at that point in time, having looked at the numbers, if that campaign was successful, because the strategy was, or the intent was, the objective was that we wanted to see a brand lift. We wanted to see people coming through, seeing the brand, and that would have been it. But if it is that we're running another campaign, Brandon, where we're trying to increase, for instance, those MVPs, the maintenance value plan members, and we, set something up in terms of promotion for that campaign, then we'd be assessing that campaign basically by how many maintenance value plan members we're able to acquire from that campaign. So the objectives vary across what it is that you do.
I think that's super important to reiterate, because the objective and understanding that objective and communicating that objective to other shareholders or leaders that maybe you report up to within the organization is important too, because especially in the contracting world, so much relies on, did it drive phone calls? Did those phone calls convert? And how much revenue did we get out the bottom? And you're right. Something like, a brand strategy, or maybe YouTube ads or geofencing when you're opening up a brand new market, the goal isn't necessarily to drive calls. Those are great. We'll take the calls, right? But,
right.
We want eyeballs. We want people to become more familiar with our brand.
Exactly.
So I think not only setting those smart objectives, but making sure that whoever needs to know internally what the objectives are all aligned on, hey, revenue might not be the ultimate measure of efficacy here, but we could loosely draw some strings, in some parallels of when we're running campaigns, how revenue did, and across some other channels. So you're in a pretty unique position, Rory. Are you able to test like new strategies on one or a couple of brands within the Heartland portfolio, the Ohio, Delaware region, and then roll it out if it's successful? Or do they keep you pretty tight to or closed walls between the companies?
Again, interesting question. I think, as you quite rightly said, I think I'm in a unique position. And one, because we've been, around so long, one. And two, the fact that, we're one of the larger brands on the Heartland platform, right? Or region two is also one of the larger regions on the platform. So in terms of testing stuff, from my experience and communicating with, those above me, they've given us the latitude to be able to do that, to be able to run and operate a business to make sure it's successful. We've been doing it for a while, and they see that, understand that. And of course, there are going to be strategies that they're going to be saying, okay, maybe you should, look at trying this or trying that. But equally with the experience comes the wisdom that, we have tried something like that previously, and these were the results, right? So if it's in a scenario like that, then we give that position to say, okay, we did this prior, this is the result. What has changed is what we're going to look at to say, okay, is this strategy going to be relevant? No. Is it going to be producing different results? What are the variables that have changed? Nothing might have changed based on that assessment. And then we'd be saying like, we do not want to go in that direction. But for the most part, in terms of testing, yeah, I've been given the latitude to be able to do a lot more than probably other brands are able to do. One, because of our size and the amount of, again, resources that we have at our disposal to be able to test in our markets. The variables that go into that alone, that decision alone, like I said, the fact of the resources, one. Two, we have the experience in having done so many things in the past that we know, based on that, we can determine if something's going to work. And three, the people ability to be able to roll something out, because an idea can be just that, a great idea. It never becomes implemented because you don't have the people with the ability, the skill sets to be able to roll it out. Right? And if it is that you don't set those smart objectives up front, what are the realistic and measurable goals that you're going after? Then those two can determine whether or not, somebody is trusting you to be able to go and do something to produce results that you're saying that you're going to be producing. So it's a number of different variables that go into that question, Brandon, in terms of testing. But yes, I have been able to test a number of different strategies in our markets. And typically I'll try rolling those out with a Blind and Sons first, because we're a larger company, can absorb more if in the event
more
that
data
something,
too. I mean,
exactly,
you can get a
there
better
you go.
data set as a test as well.
Precisely. So we've been be able to do that and rolled some different strategies out amongst the other brands. Yeah, since the start of this year, for instance, we've been doing some A/B testing with OTT, different types of messaging and that kind of a thing. And I've started with Blind and Sons, and based on that, I've rolled stuff out in, for instance, our Cincinnati market is what I've done. The Delaware market is another one that's new for me. So I'm still trying to get, learned on what all maintains there. They're a different beast altogether, being a tourist town. So they only have residents in homes for maybe about 3 months, 4 months at best out of the year. What maintains outside of that 4 month period for that company? You know what I'm saying? So understanding the dynamic of that, strategies that work here, in Northeast Ohio may not be applicable and may not be able to be rolled out essentially in that market. So it's learning the nuances of the different markets that we operate in and what it is that we're able to test in one versus what it is that we are able to test in the other. And if something is even going to work, having tested it in one versus the other. So it's dynamic. It's very dynamic.
I'm a little jealous of how many brands you got so that you could test. I wish I had 8 other companies or 9 other companies I could test on too. But, the results of those tests, like you said, I love that you're using kind of Blind as the testing ground, larger data sets. But you mentioned something interesting about, the location or proximity. You're in Ohio. That's completely different than the customer's needs or homeowner's needs in Delaware or anywhere in between, right? And so with that, I imagine it's your job, or part of your job is to hold lots of folks accountable to either budgeting or performance, right? And, one of the things I always say is that marketing can only be as successful as operations, right? Like if your CSRs are missing calls or fumbling calls, right? Not converting highly, then marketing is never going to be successful, right? Assuming the smart objective is to generate calls, leads, and revenue, right? And so in your position, working with several different companies across a very large region, how are you able to hold folks accountable, A, and then B, how do you see operations at each company's level impacting the success of marketing?
Food for thought. But for me personally, the consolidations that we've had in terms of a singular CRM at this point in time, we use Service Titan. That in effect gives me the ability to have a very wide view of what's going on in each of these companies. We have call data that comes in. The other part of it too is the fact that I have made moves to make sure that I consolidate agencies that, I use. So most of my brands are currently on the Blue Corona platform. And from that, I get all the visibility that I would additionally need, to complement what Service Titan is giving me. So having those data points at my fingertips has been critical in my management of the different brands across the entire region, one. And not only that, getting the data points, for instance, you mentioned operations and calls. calls coming in, I can always go in and sample calls from a campaign inside of service side and just the same. I can pick random calls and figure out what's going on. If I launch something today, I can go in there tomorrow and I can see, okay, what's going on with these calls? How are they being managed from a call center perspective? Equally, the data that you guys will give me too from a abandoned call perspective, I can look at that and say, operationally, we need to look at maybe hiring additional staff inside that customer service unit, one, or we need to look at how it is that, our call routing internally is impacting that abandoned call rate. If you have an IVR that's too long and customers are dropping off of it, much the same like you go online again and you look at, your scheduler online. If it is that customers are being directed to go online and they're using the scheduler, but they're dropping off at a certain point, why are they dropping off? So looking at all the strategies that we can put in place from a marketing perspective, how operations supports that and converts whatever is coming in from that is obviously critical. Because if we realize that there are issues on the operation side, much as like I mentioned just now, we can actually go in and we can make some changes to address those so that two are complementing each other, working together to achieve the singular objective. So operations is critical. The operations piece of it is critical, and hence the reason why I think the move to customer service report into me was one that the company decided was critical at the point that they made that decision, because I would then have oversight with that and I could work with the customer service manager to say, okay, this is what we're seeing and this is what it is that we need to change moving forward, if anything at all needs change, to be able to take advantage of the leads that are coming in through people calling in the office. So it's critical. That relationship is absolutely critical. And we've done, just trying to remember here much of the stuff that we've gone through, even in rolling out, for instance, the MVPs, thrust to increase our MVP bases or maintenance value plan base or membership bases across any of the companies. I can come up with a perfectly good campaign that I know will work. I can, give a discounted program online and promote the hell out of it. But if it is that there is no technician buy-in at that level, that they're not selling the plans when they go in front of the customers in the homes, it will never work. I'd never get the results from it. So from that operational perspective, with regard to that specifically, it's critical that we have an buy-in from the entire team. Doesn't matter what it is that we're rolling out strategically. It has to be there, because if it is that people don't believe in it, they will never get the results that they are expecting to get from it.
And I love what you said, Rory, about looking at the data to identify those areas of opportunities. If conversion rates tank or high abandon rate, whether it be, in the IVR or, the website, oftentimes a lot of the folks I talk to, or I'll hear stories from our clients that such and such scheduling widget is broken. It's like, well, who's checking that? There's somebody that needs to be held responsible, whether it be you, Rory, or someone else, for looking for the leaks in your own funnel, if you will. Like, our plumbers fix a lot of leaks. But you have a leaky funnel as well, oftentimes. And oftentimes that is, that leaky funnel, you have hot leads or warm leads that are abandoning that scheduling widget because it takes 10 different steps and a ton of information in the middle of it. And then you might have possibly just lost a customer. They go back to Google and go back to whoever's ranking number 2 online. So it's super important as well. So I'm glad to hear you're looking at the data, because the data is going to point to what's broken. And if you don't know, or if you can't dial it in based on the data, you probably have a tracking or visibility issue too, which is a separate issue to solve.
Exactly. So we just need to make sure, we're looking at all the data points that we need to look at. And the reality of it is there's so many different data points that you can be looking at. You could drive yourself crazy, right? So that's why you need, assistance. You need more people doing this. The plug here is that I am certainly not capable of doing it on my own. Right? That's why it is. And you have to have a trustworthy, reliable agency that you have a relationship with to be able to say to you, hey, you may be having an issue here. And it's not going to be one of those things where you're telling you this because they want to upsell an additional product that they're offering. It has to be something where you should feel as the customer, as a client, that the agency you're working with is also invested in your success, not just, filling their coffers, right? So that's how I feel about working with Blue Corona. I know that my capabilities and my bandwidth will extend so far to keep me effective in what I do. But I do need that additional assistance from Blue Corona from another partner such as Spectrum that offers me broadcast or cable or whatever. I do need that additional support to be able to look at a consolidated report, for instance, to say, okay, this is what you guys are seeing. And, strategically, I can now go in and look at it and say, okay, this is pointing to the fact that I need to do something here or there or there. I don't have to go mine the data for myself because that would be mentally, physically, just not possible, right? So I depend on that to be able to make those decisions internally as well.
Just on myself 6 months ago, elevate and delegate. I don't know if you've ever done that. And, you put what you love doing and are really good at in one quadrant, love doing, but are really bad at it, another quadrant, and goes on. And I felt like that exercise, to your point, Rory, about needing a partner or needing someone so that you can focus on either the metrics, driving the metrics that truly matter, and focus on what needs to be focused on, and let all the other agencies or media partners handle the nuances of the campaign. So
correct.
Well, Rory, this has been a fantastic conversation. My last question for you, since you have shared so much and bringing it full circle to the start of our conversation about, the start of 2024 and what's happening in the industry. Any last words of advice for someone listening who maybe is an owner or a marketer themselves, maybe dealing with a tough start to 2024? Any last advice for them in order to not necessarily turn things around today, but just keep pushing forward and remember that, business is an infinite game, right? There's no end. So progress over perfection. But any last words of advice from you for our listeners?
I mean, I think you summed it up very well, Brandon.
Sorry to steal your thunder if I did that.
Business is just that. It's business. And like I said, I've been, around businesses for a very long time, having grown up in one or grown up in a few actually. And there are always going to be highs and lows is what it boils down to, especially if you're a sole proprietor, there are always going to be those highs and lows. And I think what should drive marketers, what should drive business owners at this point in time is their willingness to learn, their willingness to be open to understanding that things change. And if it is that you're not changing with what's changing, if you get what I'm saying, if you're not adapting to the changes that are going on around you, you will be left behind. It's like COVID, for instance. COVID, I think, taught a lot of businesses that they have to be able to offer their services remotely. Before, it was a no-no. Everybody had to be in a brick and mortar building. And COVID taught majority of these businesses and business owners that, hey, I can have a team that's working remotely and being as effective or producing more than what it is that they were producing while they were in the office. And I think that's it. Being open-minded, understanding what the industry is like. If somebody is just starting out a business, they need to also understand that, hey, it's an investment. You're not in it for a sprint, right? You're going to be in it for a long haul. It's not one of those things where it's a 100-meter dash or a 50-meter dash. It's going to be one of those things where it's a long marathon, right? And once you stick to it, once you have that open-mindedness to be able to understand that that's what it is about, I think you will be successful because things change and you're going to have those pitfalls, you're going to have those highs, and you just need to understand that once you keep putting consistent effort into it, aligning yourself with the right partners, aligning yourself with the right interests as well, and setting those objectives for yourself, you will be able to essentially move beyond the low points that you're having now. It's not the end of a tunnel at all. There's light at the end of it. So just keep pressing on.
I enjoy all of our conversations, but I love talking with you today. And I know our audience is going to as well. How can people get in touch with you if they want to pick your brain?
Good question. I never even thought about that, Brandon, but I guess they're going to have to go through you guys, right?
All right. That wasn't set up, by the way, whenever this makes it to the podcast.
Exactly. I never thought that question would have been coming my way. I wasn't prepared. I am with Heartland Home Services, obviously, as our parent company. I am located physically at Blind & Sons here in Barberton, 344 4th Street Northwest, Barberton, Ohio. And yeah, I mean, my email address, rory.rowe@blindandsons.com is what you can reach me at. I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody shoots my way. And if I can't, I'll go do the research and I'll direct you to who can, is what it is. Because I don't know everything. And that's the first thing I'll admit. I don't know everything, right? And I try to learn as much as is possible, learn from other people in my industry who are exceptional and doing well. There are people out there who are doing amazing things, right? And I'm hoping to meet some of those people one day and, just pick their brains as opposed to somebody picking my brain. So I'm excited about that. So if there's anybody that wants to reach out, that's my contact information. If you don't, you never got it, watch the podcast again, or like I said, reach out to Blue Corona and Brandon, and they'll set you up to for us to be able to speak.
Well, really appreciate you joining us, Rory.